Tansei, I'm Krisanachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. A family from the Swan Lake First Nation in Manitoba is mourning the loss of their family dog after a Manitoba First Nations police officer shot and killed him in their front yard while the children were home and a school bus was just down the road picking kids up for school. And a warning, some of the details in this story may be disturbing. At around 7:30 a.m. on Wednesday, June 11th, a MFNP member went to Candida Folder's home looking for her boyfriend. He was not there. The officer wanted to search the home, but Folder told him to come back with a warrant. As the officer left, Folder's Rottweiler Duke, who was chained up on the front lawn, lunged at the officer and bit him. Police say Duke had previously bitten another person prior. Folder says the officer told her that Duke was getting euthanized today. 15 minutes later, the officer came back with a rifle and shot Duke and drove away. Folder's father buried Duke later that day, but the same officer came back, dug up the grave, and took Duke's remains away to check for rabies. Folder says the incident was very traumatic and says her children may not get another dog. In a statement, Manitoba First Nations Police Inspector Daryl Hunter said, given the very aggressive behavior of the dog and the threat it potentially posed to children and other community members, the decision was made to euthanize the animal on site. Putting an animal down is always regrettable, but our officers are faced with weighing all factors that affect public safety. As with all incidents of this nature, a review into this incident will be conducted. The family says the officer who shot their dog has also been allegedly harassing the family for several months. Swan Lake Chief Jason Daniels is also calling for a full investigation. You can read more about this story by going to our website at aptnnews.ca. The story is by Kathleen Martins, our web reporter. Some members of Garden River First Nation are demanding transparency from their chief and council. It's all over the payout of funds received from the Robinson-Huron Treaty Annuity case settlement. Protesters gathered in front of the band office on Thursday, with one demonstrator saying she plans to stay there until their concerns are addressed. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
But I'm very proud of everyone here, just so you know.
Renee Bello is a member of Garden River First Nation located east of Sault Ste. Marie. Bello contends the concerns of her community are not being heard with regard to the payout from the Robinson-Huron Treaty settlement with the federal and provincial governments.
The main issue is to hear the people in what they want. We do feel that the money is our ancestors' money, and we should have a say in that.
Protesters have been coming and going throughout the day. Some say they wanted to see a 100% per capita payout of Garden River's share of the $10 billion settlement, which amounts to roughly $610 million. But $200 million has been put into a trust fund. Others would like to know what the community's leaders intend to do with the money that was not distributed.
The traditional chiefs of the Robinson-Huron Treaty signed that treaty, and they wanted us to have that money so we can all have a better life.
You're playing with people's lives here. You know, we've got some of us that are getting older in our days. We need something to make it a little bit easier on us. You know, our kids need something to know that and there's no plan for nothing to do with it other than we're going to put it away and take it away from you.
Chief Karen Bell was not present for this week's protest as she is attending a gathering of the Chiefs of Ontario. Councillor Travis Jones met with the protesters on council's behalf. Jones says while he applauds their passion, the protesters do not speak for the entire community.
Our community goes beyond the people that protest, and that's one thing that is tricky for our leadership is we have very vocal members that want 100% payout. Our leadership feels, along with many community members, that doesn't align with the case. The case was about righting a historical wrong, righting the wrongs individually and the collective.
Jones gave no specifics about how the rest of the settlement would be spent. Meantime, Bello and her supporters say they've heard this all before, and they still feel they are not being heard.
We've had meetings in the past where these words have been said. He knows my point of view, and I know his point of view. My people's point of views is a little important here, so I think they need to be heard, and this is their chance to be heard.
Somebody has got to stand up. Somebody's got to have a voice, and somebody's got to listen. That's the worst part. There's nobody listening up until this point. So, well, we're going to get loud, and hopefully we don't have to do any more than that. But some of us are had enough.
Renee Bello says she plans to remain on site for the remainder of the work week. She adds further protests are in the works, including a plan to completely block entrance to the band office, which could happen as early as June 24th. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
A public apology from Ontario Premier Doug Ford was made on Thursday as he met with First Nation leaders in Queen's Park. The deputy leader of the NDP said comments Ford made previously this week were racist and showed a lack of understanding of the treaties. CTV's Siobhan Morris has more.
Dozens of chiefs from the Anishinaabe First Nation came to Queen's Park to meet with the Premier. It's a sit-down that began with an "I'm sorry" behind closed doors and again in front of cameras.
I just want to say I sincerely apologize for my words, not only if it hurt all the chiefs in that room, but all First Nations.
That was just over 24 hours after Doug Ford made comments that have been condemned by Indigenous leaders as racist, dangerous.
You can't just keep coming hat in hand all the time to the government. You got to be able to take care of yourselves.
Ontario's only First Nations MPP had called on the Premier to apologize.
He's calling First Nations beggars. That's not the way we create relationships.
Now, having sat with Doug Ford,
our chiefs felt today that the apology was sincere. We are looking at today as a new day.
The Anishinaabe Nation and the 39 First Nations it represents is opposed to Bill 5, which aims to speed up mining in the Ring of Fire. Their Grand Chief says they came into this meeting with suggestions, solutions.
The Premier has made certain commitments that we're not going to speak to today. We do have to respect our nations who weren't in the room today to have those further discussions.
Ford has said his goal is to designate the mineral-rich Ring of Fire a special economic zone where some laws can be ignored as quickly as possible.
This meeting in particular wasn't all about Bill 5. It was about Ontario upholding their treaty responsibility.
The Premier emphasizes the need for collaboration.
I'll always respect treaty rights, and I'll always respect duty to consult, because without First Nations, we can't get the critical minerals out of the ground.
Something the government feels is key to Ontario's prosperity going forward. Siobhan Morris, CTV News.
To the ongoing fight now over Bill C-5, Ganowag Grand Chief Cody Daibo went to Ottawa on Wednesday to protest the legislation. It would allow the federal government to identify infrastructure projects of national interest, accelerating the approval process through a single permit. The Grand Chief says he attended the protest on Parliament Hill to show solidarity with all Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Daibo calls this legislation typical of the Liberal government. The Grand Chief says he made multiple attempts to contact Prime Minister Mark Carney's office to request a meeting to discuss Bill C-5. He received a response on Wednesday stating that a meeting is not possible at this time. Daibo says there are concerns over how this bill could affect Ganowag.
The concern for us is, are they going to be trying to push through other projects through here? Things that have happened in the past will not happen again, and then it kind of pits us against the general population, because then we're going to have to rise up and do actions, and we don't want that either at the end of the day, but we will defend our land and our rights to the utmost. So these are the concerns that we have. That's just the broad view of this bill. It's not clear, and the definitions are way too broad that you can just fit anything under the guise of national interest or prosperity.
An Indigenous sculpture that was well known in Ontario for many decades has a new resting place. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. A 26-foot carving of an Indigenous man made from white pine was laid to rest Thursday morning during a special ceremony. A Nabising sculpture, which was in storage for 7 years, was returned to the Canadian Ecology Centre near Mattawa in Ontario. CTV's Eric Tashner reports.
It was a prominent sculpture on the North Bay landscape for 3 decades. But now the Nabising sculpture has its final resting place at the Canadian Ecology Centre.
It's important that we not be seen as people of the past, that we're still here.
It was first erected in September 1988 as part of a series of carvings called the Trail of the Whispering Giants, created by Florida artist Peter Wolf Toth.
The purpose of my work is important, that it honors people facing injustice.
For 3 decades, it stood at the corner of the Seymour Street and Highway 1117 bypass beside the former home of the Dion quintuplets.
It brought a lot of people to North Bay in terms of seeing it because it was the first statue outside of the States.
When the house was moved in 2018, the sculpture was hauled away into storage. Over time, it started to crack and was no longer suitable for relocation. More importantly, as First Nation cultural advisor Morris Switzer explains, while it was made with the best intentions, it's not culturally appropriate today.
It's not considered appropriate that any peoples, whether they're black, white, yellow, or red, to be mascots or stereotypes or caricatures.
So, a small ceremony was held to welcome the sculpture to the Samuel de Champlain Provincial Park, where it can be used as an educational tool before nature will eventually take its course.
Understanding the current culture that we're in and the current situation, it's a great opportunity in terms of how to bring it back to Mother Earth in a respectful way.
Murray Sinclair said, education got us into this mess, and education will get us out of this mess.
Toth is happy with the outcome. He's hoping people who visit the sculpture will reflect on injustice Indigenous people have faced over the years.
These statues are made to honor the First Nation in Canada.
Eric Tashner, CTV News, Mattawa.
This week, we've heard the insights of artists who have faced pretendian accusations and call-out culture head-on. For our fourth segment of Face Value, some seasoned Indigenous music professionals provide advice rooted in culture and community care. Here's APTN's Veronica Blackhawk with more.
Took my identity, I'm taking it back. I am Anishinaabe, I belong to the land.
Leonard Sumner is a rapper from Little Saskatchewan First Nation, Manitoba. Desiree Dorian is a Cree country musician from Dauphin, Manitoba. Both are renowned trailblazers in the Indigenous music community. The artists shed a light on our view of false identity claims.
I think it's super important for young people to have an understanding of who they are and to be able to see themselves represented fairly. But at the same time, indigeneity and the face of it has always been shifting. I feel like a lot of people are realizing how important it is to protect our identity, but at the same time, we're still picking up the pieces in the puzzle of who we are as a people.
Leonard suggests taking a step back to process how our collective loss of culture adds to the confusion, bringing us to the root of the cause.
The way the music industry operates is they like one voice to be the punctuation for everything. When you don't have a genuine experience on a platform speaking the truth, it just makes room for a lot more lies.
While the public is determined to police Indigenous identity fraud, our communities still welcome newcomers.
People can participate in respectful ways, that they don't have to become the main voice. There's not one voice for community. We're just one of many.
Greta, don't you get that gun now? Greta, don't you get that gun?
In recent years, Desiree Dorian's seen a push for accountability in Indigenous spaces. However, the wider industry of non-Indigenous professionals are slow to catch on.
What we're seeing a lot in festivals right now across Canada is buyers are booking Indigenous artists who are quote-unquote palatable to their audiences. We don't often see brown faces being presented at festivals.
Desiree acknowledges that cultural identity is more than skin deep. Understanding our individual histories can help us see where we fit into these spaces.
I can travel fairly easily in Indigenous and non-Indigenous worlds. And I think about that conversely with my, brown-skinned relatives. And I think if you know who you are and you know where you come from and you know where you're going, then there's no reason to be guilty about the space that you're taking up.
In terms of non-Indigenous adoptees looking to benefit from Indigenous opportunities, the musicians clap back.
Just because you're adopted into a family doesn't necessarily mean that you adopt all the hardships and all the history with that. You don't carry that baggage in the same way that your adoptive family does. I mean, we have so many issues in our communities, and if you want to tell a story about one of those issues that you don't have a connection to, you might want to rethink that. And
we don't need anybody to speak for us on our behalf. We're more than capable of telling our own stories.
For non-Indigenous folks seeking direction on this topic, Desiree suggests connecting with a trusted member from your surrounding Indigenous communities. Avoiding the conversation can alter the credibility of your platform and cause real harm to Indigenous people. Learn more about the network of Indigenous professionals who are taking a holistic approach to protecting these spaces tomorrow on the final segment of Face Value. Veronica Blackhawk, APTN National News.
Thank you, Veronica. We now want to tell you about this week's 3 new web poll questions. Over on our website, we ask, are you prepared to evacuate your home in an emergency? Your answers are yes, very, yes, somewhat, and not at all. Next question we ask, do you believe the G7 considers Indigenous rights in its decision on climate, trade, and security? You can answer yes, no, or not sure. And our third question is a pop quiz. Without looking it up, what year did Idle No More begin? Was it in 2011, 2012, or 2014? I was reporting in Regina when Idle No More started and remember going to all of the protests there. Go to our website at aptnnews.ca/polls to have your say. We will post the results next Tuesday. The premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan recently met in Lloydminster, and APTN News was there. We'll bring you an update of what was said after the break. Thanks for staying with us. St. John's 25, Charlottetown 23. 3 in Cartwright, rain in Happy Valley Goose Bay at 7. Zaquinay 16 and sun, Quebec City 15. Ottawa 19 and sunny there, Peterborough 19. Big Trout Lake 19 and sun, Sioux Lookout 19. 8 in Churchill, God's Lake 20 and sun. 21 in Princess Harbor, Dauphin, sunny there and 19. Partly cloudy in Regina at 17, North Battleford, sun and 16. 15 in Buffalo Narrows, Stony Rapids 9. Rain in Grand Prairie at 19, Fort McMurray 21 and partly cloudy. Showers in Medicine Hat at 19, Edmonton 20. Showers in Kamloops at 24, Campbell River 19. 21 in Prince George, Prince Rupert, sunny there and 17. 20 in Watson Lake, Mayo 27. 21 in Trout Lake, Yellowknife 11 and partly cloudy. Fort McPherson 26, Colville Lake 15. 6 in Chesterfield, Baker Lake 11. And Iqaluit 4, Aglulik, +9 and sun. The premiers of Saskatchewan and Alberta held a joint caucus meeting Wednesday in Lloydminster, the small border city situated in both provinces. Our APTN web reporter Leanne Sanders was at the following press conference with Scott Moe and Danielle Smith. We spoke to Leanne earlier. Here's that interview. Leanne, thanks so much for chatting with us. What was the focus of this meeting between both premiers?
Well, I think the premiers wanted to present somewhat of a unified front to put some pressure on the Carney government over control of their resources. They talked about the commonalities that the provinces share, but also their unique identities. They do say they are fully on board with the Carney government's Bill C5. And Smith said enough is enough. She actually thinks that it should go a little bit further. She said in order to provide more social programs, more revenue is needed, and that means more resource development.
And what did Premier Smith have to say to the media and what she wants from Ottawa?
Well, she reiterated some of the same talking points around the resource sector demands that she's made of the federal government. And those are things like removing the West Coast tanker ban, removing the emissions cap, canceling the net zero electricity regulations, and getting rid of the toxic label that is placed on plastics.
And how about Premier Scott Moe? What did he want from Ottawa and have that done there?
Well, Moe said that Canada's top priority should be building an energy corridor that connects the northwest coast to the coast of Hudson Bay, and that would allow Canadian energy to access foreign markets a little bit more easily, such as Asia. So that was his main thing. Smith did acknowledge that getting things like liquid natural gas transmission lines and oil pipelines, Indigenous stakeholders would have to be involved in that to get the projects done because they would cross more than one treaty territory to get the products to ports.
And was there anything about how treaty rights would be impacted by all of this?
When they were asked about First Nations leaders being upset with the lack of consultation on Bill C5, both premiers pointed out they have existing programs. Smith spoke of the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation with $1 billion loan guarantee, and Moe talked about the Indigenous Finance Corporation, but they didn't really elaborate on how those investment entities fulfill the consultation requirements of UNDRIP's free, prior, and informed consent provision for projects that could impact First Nations communities. There was some late breaking news here today on Bill C5 this afternoon. An amendment was made to remove the Indian Act from the list of laws that the government can sidestep when determining whether a project should move forward. I guess we'll just have to see what First Nations leaders have to say about whether it's enough to satisfy at least some of their concerns with Bill C5.
So they pointed out some existing First Nation programs, but made no specific reference to treaty rights. Was this because they weren't asked specifically?
Yeah, well, none of the mainstream reporters asked specifically about that. And I wasn't given the chance to ask either, as the Premier staff had cut off the questions so that the Premiers could catch their flights home. I have put those questions to the Premier staff to ask of them. And so I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they respond to that question.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. That's Leanne Sanders reporting from Lloydminster. Thank you, Leanne.
You're welcome.
And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith did respond to APTN News questions for that press conference. She said, "I want to assure you that Alberta's government recognizes the importance of protecting treaty rights, traditional uses, and harvesting activities both now and in the future. We are deeply committed to meaningful consultation with First Nations on projects where these rights may be affected." And that's your daytime newscast for this Friday, one day before National Indigenous Peoples Day. Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast in a few hours. Please join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next Tuesday. Have a safe weekend with family. Ekse.